is Berenice Jackson interviewing Cora Prophet, December the 11th, 1984, in Buffalo, Oklahoma. Okay, Cora, tell me where you were born and when.
Did I just repeat what I...
Yeah.
I was born in Van Buren County, Iowa, October the 25th, 1889. And I was one of three children, or rather four. My oldest sister was born and died before we were born.
Mm-hmm.
I had a brother older than me, about 2.5 years, and a sister 4.5 years younger.
Okay, what were their names?
My brother was Frank Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
Egger was our given name.
What was it?
Egger, A-G-E-R, Egger.
Just, okay.
And my sister was Mary Marjorie Egger.
Mm-hmm.
That was our family name, was Egger.
Yes.
And we left Iowa in 1900 and came by covered wagon. We had covered wagon. We had a buggy with a single horse we drove. We brought both of them.
What did you bring? What did you bring in your wagon?
Well, we just brought living equipment.
Mm-hmm.
That is, we had our beds fixed in the wagon, and we cooked beside the road wherever we wanted to make a campfire.
You didn't move any furniture or
We
bring
didn't
any
bring any
livestock?
furniture, nothing,
No livestock.
except a trunk, and I think we left it and had it shipped before we got through.
Yes.
And we came to Greenwood County, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And we farmed there. It was in the year 1901, and it was the driest year the United States could ever raised. Nobody raised anything. In fact, if we'd raised a good crop, we probably would have been there yet. But then we left there in April of 1902 and come on to Woods County, or Garfield County, Oklahoma. And we stayed there till in March of 1903, but we filed on our land out here in 1902. My father come out here and filed. But we didn't come with a family till March of 1903. And, of course, you understood that people went to the land office at Woodward and found out where their places was that they could file on. People filed direct, and people bought relinquishments and filed. But we bought direct and filed direct. And I and my husband still have the deed to the farm.
Oh.
It has never been out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, we lived just like pioneer people lived. We'd call it awful hardship now if we had to go through it. But people were friendlier, and I believe they were more sociable, and they wasn't the idea of trying to impress one another like there is today. And in fact, it was a pretty good life people lived, but they lived hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to raising crops, raised broom corn at first, then they some spread out and raised cotton. Cotton wasn't too good a crop yet. And I married in 1910. My husband's place was a mile west. He filed on his place in 1960. And we stayed in that place. And of course, we moved on the farm, and we raised a large family, and...
How many children did you have?
We had 12 children.
12?
12 children. 3 died in infancy or babyhood.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 of them grown, and 5 of them live right here in Buffalo. 4 of them live right here in Buffalo.
Well, can you name the 4 that live here in Buffalo?
Yes, Miss Frances Harper is the oldest of the family, and the next the oldest daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sterling is my oldest son, Sterling Prophet. And then there's Bill Prophet. He lives out to the edge of town. And Glenn Prophet.
Mm-hmm.
They're all here in town. I have a daughter at Alva, Oklahoma. She's my youngest daughter.
And what's her name?
Fleming. Miss Pearl Fleming. She teaches in the elementary school over there.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a special school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband is a barber.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a daughter at Mountain View, Oklahoma. That's in Cora County.
Yes.
She is a widow. Been a widow for 21 or 2 years. And they have a daughter at Shattuck.
What's her name?
That's Cordy Goodwin.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a son at Wichita, Kansas.
Mm-hmm. And what's
And
his name?
Eldon. That's my
Eldon.
next oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
And they live in Wichita. They're retired. And I have a son at Pueblo, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
His name's Dean.
Mm-hmm.
And he's with the Triplex Piston Company out there and has been for the last 30 or 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the history of my family.
Yeah, okay. Now let's go back when you were a little girl.
Yes,
You were in Iowa.
yes.
Now, what part of Iowa? What, just generally
Well,
speaking?
It was right across the line from Missouri. There was just the dividing line. We went
Mhm.
from Van Buren, Iowa, down to Scotland County, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
But the nearest town that I can speak of is Memphis, I believe. No, that's not right. Fort Madison Highway.
Mm-hmm.
That's right down the Des Moines River. We lived on the Des Moines River.
That would be in the southwest corner, wouldn't it, of Iowa?
Well,
Or
it
down-
would be inclined to be there.
It'd be in the southwest.
But it wouldn't
part.
be clear over in the southwest
Mhm.
corner.
And you lived on a farm?
We lived on a farm. Now, I'll tell you one thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few people, but you know at one time there was a bunch of people gathered at Washington, or were going to Washington, and tell them how to run the country.
Mm-hmm.
The name was Kelly. And they came down the Des Moines River. That's where we lived, on the banks, not far from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was caused a lot of excitement when Kelly and his men went down the Des Moines River.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I remember, we had gone to a neighbor's. We all got together and had a nice dinner. We just got it ready when they come and told us that they were going down the river. So we hurried off to the river bank to watch it. And when we got back, they'd stopped long enough to come in and eat our dinner.
While you were gone.
While we were gone. So I always remembered when Kelly's men went down the river. That was the only thing.
Well, I'll bet they had a good dinner then.
I guess they did. I hope they did.
You hope they enjoyed it.
Of course, I wasn't but about 6 or 7 years old. I don't
Mhm.
remember much.
Yes.
But,
You lived on a farm evidently.
yeah, we lived on a
And
farm.
what crops did your father raise?
Oh, they raised a little of everything in our way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We had good gardens, and we had everything they planted grown.
Mm-hmm. That's
Corn.
good country up there.
Yeah, I think you might say corn was the main crop.
Yeah.
They used, but
And I suppose he had cattle.
no,
No?
except milk cows.
No.
And,
Did you raise hogs?
I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
As an old,
Don't remember.
I wasn't, but see, I wasn't 11 years old yet when we
Mhm.
left there, and them things I didn't pay too much attention.
What was your chore around the place?
Huh?
What was your chores? What chores was assigned for you to do?
I
For the-
suppose to just keep out of the rest of the way.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
of course, Mother wove. Now, she did do a lot of weaving. I remember that.
mhm.
And remember her loan.
Where was your mother born?
My mother was born in Indiana.
Uh-huh.
Her maiden name was No, her maiden name was Kisley.
Mhm.
Her father's mother was married in Indiana,
Mhm.
and my father was born in Ohio.
Mhm.
But my father was, his wife, his mother was a widow.
Mhm.
Her husband was a doctor, and but he died young.
Mhm.
She brought her family from Ohio to Mount Zion, Iowa.
Mhm. Well, how did your parents come to meet? One in Indiana and one in Ohio.
Oh, well, they said mother's people had come to Missouri,
Oh.
and so had father's people come from Ohio to Iowa.
Uh-huh.
And it's like I say, Scotland County was on one side, Van Buren County was on the other. And I don't know how they met, but they did. I think mother worked over among her friends, as she had relatives over there.
Mhm.
They met, but they didn't meet very young, for my mother was 32 years old and my father was 37 when they were married.
Well, what year were they married? Do you remember?
They were married in 1883,
Mhm.
the 26th day of September.
Well, and they moved immediately to this farm, I guess.
Well, the farm belonged to his mother.
Oh, I see.
You see, he growed up, and he was the man of the house with his mother.
Mhm.
And they bought the farm, and they lived on the farm until she decided that she would sell it and move to town. So then we moved back and lived in Missouri. And then we didn't really have any real destination till we picked up and come to Oklahoma.
Do you remember what part of Missouri you lived in? What town?
Well, I remember, but then I know it wouldn't be. There was just a little post office they called Azen,
Mhm.
and there's another little post office they called Boston,
Mhm.
but Memphis, Missouri. You see that name in the paper. Now
Mhm.
that was the nearest that there was a big town, was Memphis, Missouri. And we went across the line, like I say, there was just a dividing
Yes.
line, into Cantrell, Iowa. Well, Cantrell, Iowa was nearer to where we lived than Memphis was.
I see. Mhm. What did your father do there?
Oh, he worked by day's work,
Mhm,
and
just
he
whatever.
farmed when we moved over to Missouri.
Mhm.
Well, my mother's people had land over there, and he farmed there. We never was big landowners.
Mhm.
And,
And so why did he come to Oklahoma then?
oh, he just took a notion that he wanted to come, I guess.
Mhm.
He come out here with they had a big convention, and people come to Kansas City, and he come out with them.
Mhm.
My dad belonged more to the bookkeeping and traveling outfit than he did. He run a livery stable, and in them days when you had a livery stable, you had teams and buggies for rent, and he drove with pretty important people all over the state of Iowa.
Mhm.
And he was a man more inclined to be that way. A writer, he wrote a lot for the Journal here in around Buffalo.
Oh, he did?
And he was 89 years old when he died.
Yeah.
And he made his home with me the last several years.
Mhm.
And
Well, he was pretty well educated then, was he? Or?
not only in one way. He got more education by traveling and observation than he did by going to school. He had a common school education, I guess.
Sometimes that's the best way to become educated.
But he done a lot of reading, and he kept up on back things, and he wasn't no great big political character, although he was a Republican.
Mhm.
But,
Yes.
Well, his boat that she saw there, they came over on a boat in a shipwreck,
yeah,
and then his dad, I think he was a doctor, and he installed one of the first steel plates, and the person said it was ever installed.
Now that was
Her dad.
her father,
now my grandfather,
or your grandfather. And what was his name?
his name was John M. Ager.
Mhm. And
But
whereabouts?
My grandparents, my grandmother came from County Tyrone, Ireland,
Mhm.
and they were shipwrecked off the coast of Nova Scotia. And we have records, but I can't remember them now to tell you, but we have again taken off. Well, she came on to Iowa, or to Ohio, Carroll County, Ohio, and she married her cousin, really. That is, they were quite removed, but and he was a doctor. And like she said, it's on record. We've been told it is, but we've never went into it. That he was the first doctor to ever put a steel plate in a man's skull. They called it trepanning skull. Well, he died. I think my father's 9 years old when he died. Of course, you understand the Presbyterians were very strict people.
Yes.
My father never prayed outside on Sunday until the day that his father died. He slipped out. I heard him tell it. But he said they wasn't long bringing him back in.
Now, in what city was this operation that it took place?
Well, they were, the town of it was called Mechanicsburg, I'm sure of it.
It was what?
Mechanicsburg.
And where?
It's
What
in
state?
Carroll County, Ohio.
Ohio.
And
he was a surgeon then.
I suppose.
Your
but
grandfather
when you
was
take that into consideration, we call him a sergeant, and he probably was, or wouldn't. But he was a doctor over 135 years ago.
Yes.
You can see how medical.
Well, at that time, that was an operation that was new, and they were
Well, we
making
have
progress in medicine at that
I
time.
have a cousin in Florida that does a lot of researching, and she has kind of got on to this. I think she's writing up some more about it. She's continually writing and studying on it.
Yes.
And so that we keep up with these things. And it's
And who was the patient he operated on? Do you know? Who was the patient?
no, I don't
You don't know.
of course, and I don't know. Now, this was written to my father after he got to be an old man.
Well,
Well, if his father done the operation, he done it before he was 9 years old.
yes,
So you see, it wasn't passed on too good.
yes.
But it was a cousin, and he was a dentist. I remember that. But then it was, it was several years afterwards. It just,
Now, your grandfather, I don't believe you told me what country he came from.
well, my grandfather was, I suppose they were all originally from Ireland.
From Ireland.
My father's people was Irish.
Well,
And I suppose that his people had come from Ireland the same
as your grandmother.
as grandfather. Now, I got a little card from my cousin the other day, and she mentioned a record of several different families of my grandfather's name. That they had been a record made of.
Did you spell that name for me?
A-G-E-R.
A-G-E-R.
It's an uncommon name.
Yes, it is.
You hardly ever seen it, and still my son at Pueblo has just lately met two ladies at church by the same name. And when he interviewed them or talked to them, of course he said he wasn't pushy. Why, their father lived in Pueblo, and he was 91 years old. But they were natives, as far as they could remember, of Missouri. Of course, I guess maybe we could have had some relatives over there. It may be relation, I don't know.
Might pay to look into that.
Huh?
Might pay to look into
Yeah,
that.
well,
You
I
might
think
find
some of them will. I wrote to my cousin about it. And he said, though, that the two ladies were small ladies and reminded him quite a bit of his grandfather.
Well,
So he kind of thought maybe they were, but I
is
don't.
he working up his family tree then?
Oh, no. He's not
Oh, he should. Are you?
Oh,
No.
not too much.
Now, oh, you should.
She's got a lot
Well,
of
that's
things
like
on.
I say, this cousin in Florida is working on
Is,
that.
yes.
And she has kept up a lot of it. And, But as far as remembering, and of course, people say when you get to be 95, And when you get to be so on and so on, you're old.
But you're not old.
I am not old, and I
can see.
don't think old.
Well, that's good. That's good.
And I do my own housework, and I live by myself.
Yes.
And I don't, my children has never told me what to do. Now, I pat myself on the back, but that's the kind of family I got.
Mhm.
My son farms my land.
Mhm.
He comes down there. He don't tell me what he's going to do. He tells me what we're going to do, and asks if we shall do it.
Well, that's right.
And I have my youngest daughter tends to my money matters.
Mhm.
And now this daughter here,
Mhm.
she's an altogether daughter. She does a little everything. But she sees that I'm taken care of medically.
Well,
I depend on her for that.
yes.
I don't, when I have an ache or pain, she hears that.
Mhm.
But she has her hands full with her own business. She's a businesswoman herself,
Well,
and
good.
has been for years.
And now your name is Mrs. Frances
Harper.
Harper.
From the Harper's Cafe down there.
Oh, I've eaten in your cafe.
Her about, we went in 1949,
Oh.
and I've turned it over to the boys now. I don't go back and work too much.
Oh, you don't. Mhm.
They think I put in enough time.
Well, that's a good place to eat. I've eaten there. Now, let's go back to when you landed here in Oklahoma.
Huh?
Let's go back to where you landed in Oklahoma and begin from there.
You mean when we landed on the claim?
On the claim, yes.
Well, you see, we were located about 4 miles north and east, north and west of Kibbe, Oklahoma. Now, Kibbe, Oklahoma, today is nothing but a cedar tree drawn in the middle of where the old schoolhouse stood.
Okay, I want you to tell me how it looked when you arrived.
Well, when we arrived, we just went up the street.
How many
And
businesses were in?
Well, you'd be surprised. There was a one-room schoolhouse. There was a long sod building some folks lived in. And there was a little one-room store with a shed on the back of it that the man lived in. He kept the post office, he kept the store.
Mm-hmm. What was his name? Do you
His
remember?
name was Marion, John Marion.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the people that lived in the long house was Phillips.
Mm-hmm.
They'd come there, a bunch of them, and piled on different land. When we drove in there, it was snowy and bad. And I might say right at the start that my father was never too thrilled over coming to take up a claim in Harper, or in Woodard County, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother was really thrilled. And but we stayed all night at a place. These people that lived in this, some of their boys had a dugout, or it's a pretty nice little dugout.
Mm-hmm.
They invited us down there to cook our supper, and we stayed in our covered wagon, of course. We stayed all night, and the next morning we drove out to our claim.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the dugout and the living equipment that people had in them days,
Tell me about it. What?
well, I couldn't, now I tell you about ours, but ours wasn't common. My
Okay,
dad,
Tell me about yours.
we had, I suppose, our room that he fixed was either about 16 by 16 or 20 by 20.
A dugout?
Well,
That
he
big?
didn't dig a dugout. He dug down in about 4 foot.
I see.
And then he bought lumber and come up, and we had a window out in front and a window laid back where it went back into the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he put a board roof on it.
Mhm.
That was luxury to what
Yes.
most people had.
Yes, I know.
And Mother had looked forward to it,
Mm-hmm.
and he had come out there and lived. But when we got there, he'd forgot to get the dirt out of the middle of the house. We had a great big chunk of it before we could move in. But that was a joke.
Mm-hmm.
But now another instance, when he come out there in 1902, he brought a cook stove.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose. I don't remember, but there was one you could bake on and cook on.
Mm-hmm.
So he went back to Woods County. He left it there. But when we came back, there was no cook stove. It was gone. But we heard just as quick as they found out we was there, the neighbors returned our cook stove.
Oh.
They didn't have a cook stove. There's no way to bake bread.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that, and they knew that, and they come and borrowed a stove.
Mm-hmm.
It was all right. There was no hard feelings. We
Sure.
was all good friends.
Sure.
But now I say that maybe we had a little nicer dugout than most
Mhm.
people had.
Mm-hmm.
But also there were several nights just dug back in the room, and there's generally a window out front at
Mhm.
night. But one I remember especially, and the lady was pretty well off, but she wanted to homestead a farm.
Mhm.
And I stopped to see her one day. We knew her. There was quite a French of them. And I guess if you would speak in, say, about the size of pickup, there was a hole dug down in the ground. It was covered with a pole put down, and there was leaves and dirt over it. You went down into it this way with steps, and I don't remember whether there's a door into it or not, but I suppose there was.
Mm-hmm.
She had a bed in one corner. She had a little mug stove over here and some cracker boxes sitting around, you know, they were wooden boxes with their cooking equipment and their groceries.
Mm-hmm.
And she lived in that hole in that ground. Of course, she didn't come and stay but about 2 weeks at a time, and then she went back, and then she come back.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have lived in that dirt hole for all the land she ever owned.
But she proved it up that
She
way.
proved it up, and her family still owns the farm, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's right down kind of west of Kibby.
Mm-hmm. Then you folks had 2 rooms.
No, we just had
Just
one.
had
room.
one big room.
Just one big room.
Mm-hmm.
And,
By that time you had some beds. How did you?
well, we brought our bed. I
Mhm.
suppose we brought bed, maybe shipped them from Iowa. I
Mhm.
don't remember that really.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I could remember it if I wanted to, but kid-like, I didn't pay no attention to it.
That's right. I understand.
And then the next year we built a sod house, but it was
Mhm.
still a one-room house, but we
Mhm.
built it up. And sod houses were not such a, they were pretty nice houses.
They were warm
They were warm
And
in the
cool.
summer, and they were cool.
in the
And
summertime.
we had our windows and ours, and
Mm-hmm.
of course there was quite a setback in. You could set back and keep things in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a very comfortable little house, nothing fine,
Just one big room.
just one big room.
Mm-hmm. But you still used this other
No, I think maybe used it for a stable.
store.
I don't know.
or something.
I don't know.
Mhm.
And we drilled a. It was not a common thing for people to drill wells, deep wells,
Mm-hmm.
to get good water.
Mm-hmm. How did you manage?
Well, we got good water,
Mm-hmm.
and
Hand dug well.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. My father dug the well. And my
Did you
brother-
remember how many feet you had to dig
I
in?
don't know. Went down quite a while, but my father said that if we didn't get good water, we'd be packing up because he would not stay if we didn't have good water.
Mm-hmm.
So Mother wasn't at home when they struck the water and brought some out. Well, they figured good water would cook beans.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, I put on some beans to cook. I wasn't but about 13, 14 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at that time, you know, maybe you know it yet, you can add a little soda to the water, and that makes the beans cook better. Well, boy, I got plenty of soda in there, because I wanted to cook them beans.
Wait just a minute. I'm going to have to turn this.
suppose it's all right we stayed, anyway.
that helped you to decide to stay, didn't it?
And, you know, speaking about that, when Mother was dying, they had a family moved in there. They'd been there quite some time. In fact, they had a nice four-roomed house, the boy did. But the mother died. We didn't know them, but they come, and when Mother go out, she went over and set up.
Mm-hmm.
They put in the night, a singing, you know, and had quite a night. That's what she was.
Mm-hmm.
That was among our first deaths there.
In the neighborhood.
In that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then another time, later that, there was a man died. He brought his family out there and filed, and they raised broomcorn. And I imagine he had some lung trouble. But they seeded the broomcorn, you know, there's quite a dust.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he took sick and died that night.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, the neighbors went in and made his casket out of lumber. Of course, they lined it with quilts and
Mm-hmm.
probably their best sheets, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the man didn't have what we'd call a good suit today to live with. They either bought or somebody had some black calico,
Mm-hmm.
and they made him a suit. The ladies did.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably was like a whole lot like a pajama suit now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I think he had a white shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose they had a funeral service at the house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But that's one of the things I remember quite well. Mother went there. Of course, she didn't know the people, but she got acquainted with several up there.
Well, people went out and helped each other.
People helped one another,
Mhm.
and they went. Now, this man, I know right where he was a soldier.
Do you remember his name?
Yes, his name is Maxwell. I don't remember his
Maxwell.
given name, but his name is Maxwell.
Mhm.
And I might say that some of his, I don't know, it would go back maybe to the great-grandson, has taken the medical degree at Alva. You see his name in the papers.
Oh,
And I don't know, do you know a name, Miss Appleton?
no, I'm not.
Oh, you're not acquainted yet.
I'm not.
Well, Miss Appleton here in town. Now, I'm thinking about Miss Lily Chase, but she is related to the Appletons. But Mrs. Lily Chase is the grandmother of the son that's getting the medical degree.
Mm-hmm.
And he's married lately. The papers has been full of it at Alva and places, and
Mm-hmm.
he's quite well thought of.
Mm-hmm. And he's a descendant of this.
He's a descendant of this man. In fact, well, his father's father was, this man was his father's father's son, father, the two was.
Mm-hmm. And your families remained friends then?
Oh, yeah,
From that time on.
everybody was friends. There wasn't, of course, there was people that growed up. You remember that I remember this country when there was a family on every quarter section.
Yes.
To take a quarter section, there was 4 families. I can name a whole lot of them as far as that's concerned. But nowadays, there isn't.
No,
There's 4 or 5 sections to one family.
that's right. Where did you go to school at when you...
Well, we went to school to Kibby,
Mm-hmm.
and
In this one-room school that you saw?
it
as
was
you came
one
in?
room school to start in with.
Was it a sod
But
house?
then they later built another room onto it and made a
Oh.
2-room school.
Mhm.
And then about the year 19, to my notion, it was 1915,
Mm-hmm.
why they built a nice 4-room schoolhouse there.
Well,
And people graduated from the Kibby school.
mm-hmm.
In fact, I think all my kids, or most of them, graduated from high school to Kibby.
Well,
And,
it went that far, up
and
through high
it went
school.
up that far.
Mm-hmm.
And today, the Kibby people and the Kibby students,
Mm-hmm.
in August, they meet together down at the Harper Cafe. My daughter is
Mm-hmm.
kind of head mistress, I guess. And they have a regular get-together, and they're a happy bunch.
Oh, I'll bet. I bet they have a good time.
And, you know, one day I went up and told them I was the oldest graduate, but I haven't gone back since. I
Oh.
thought, time for me to quit.
Oh, I don't think you ever should quit.
But then
And did you go through high school? At that?
I only went to eighth grade, but I could have if I'd have went on and returned or attended what they called a course that they had in Buffalo, I could taught.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of the two of the girls that I went to school with did teach, but I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go on with it.
Did your father ever got to liking this country?
Huh?
Did your father ever got to where he liked this country?
Oh, as he got older, he didn't care.
He didn't care. What crops did he raise?
Now, what crops we raised, my father never raised anything but little broom corn and
Oh.
like that. But
Mm-hmm.
about the time that I was married, why, my husband had a wheat crop out that year.
Mm-hmm.
And that, as far as I know, was the beginning of people raising wheat. That was 1910.
Mm-hmm.
And there might have been a few did before, but also about that time, out south and east, south and west of Kitty, was what was called the Cooper Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
Man come on here from Nevada, Missouri, and bought land, and he got people to come on and filed on land, and they got the land, and he bought it from them.
Mm-hmm.
Built up quite an estate there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went to the north and east about 2 miles. There's what they call the Rudolph and Eastmore Ranch. A man by the name of Tucker that was foreman. His daughter, Miss Irene Page, lives here in Buffalo now. And the Rudolph and Eastmore Ranch done a lot towards helping settlers. They hauled cake from Woodward for them. They got a lot of work, but as I remember, I don't think the Coopers ever put out much to help the homesteaders stay on their land.
Mm-hmm.
But they had 2 boys, and the older Cooper died.
Is that ranch still in existence?
Oh, yeah, that ranch house, it finally belongs to a man by the name of Whitehead at Woodward. I think he's a doctor.
Uh-huh.
And but it passed from the Coopers. That's what I was going to say. The 2 Cooper boys, the older one pulled off and had a ranch of his own,
Mm-hmm.
and the younger one stayed with his mother. He was a lot more for having a good time than he was for getting down to business. He liked to raise wheat, but he didn't care anything about cattle.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they told us his tale one time his dad sent him out to separate some cattle somewhere or to take care of a cow that had got out or something. He killed it. But I don't know how true that was.
Yes.
But anyway, he was a wheat man.
Mm-hmm.
But hard times set in, and depression in 29, you know,
Mhm.
and 30 hurt everybody.
How did it affect you folks?
Didn't affect us, for we'd always been poor. Didn't make much
Didn't
difference.
make much difference.
And but the Coopers did. They lost their land. Belonged to a man by the name of Randall owned it, and Randall had sold it for Whitehead.
Whitehead or White Neck?
Huh?
Is it Whitehead or White Neck?
Well, now that thing I wouldn't tell you for sure. It was Whitehead or White Neck. I kind of believe it's White Neck, though.
It's White Neck, you think, or Whitehead?
I believe it was right now.
There's a Dr. White Neck in Woodward.
Yeah.
Well, and that's who it is. He is a doctor. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they come up, well, they built a lovely ranch house, that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, they built a ranch house that was way ahead of the times that we had then.
Yes.
I don't know whether they got electric lights in it or not, but they probably did, but they made their own generators.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they had things pretty nice. But he died, and his wife was quite a manager herself,
Mm-hmm.
and she,
Well, did the bank go broke here in Buffalo in 29?
You know, I
Great
just
Depression?
don't really know about the banks. I just, we had a bank that was run by a family named McMahon's. There was one time that something went wrong here. Somebody, did Rio McMahon ever go to the penitentiary? I really don't know either, but the vice president did. He was a Marine, and he did. There was something, and there was one of the McMahon boys that seemed to set a gun down the wrong way, and it went on and killed him, but everybody thought he knew how he set it down. Now, we just never knew about that. And there is some of a few of the McMahon ancestors around here, but I don't really know them.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's Terry McMahon lives in
Oh,
Dublin.
we've been there, yeah. Right.
And
Well, you have a good bank here now.
yes, he has a good
Real
bank
good
now.
bank. Well, what cash crop did your father have?
Well, now, like I say about my father didn't do too much farming.
Mm-hmm.
About the time that we were married, well, before we were married, my husband bought his farm.
Oh.
And in 1912,
Mm-hmm.
there was my sister married. My sister married at Supply. Her
Mhm.
name was DeVore. DeVore's pretty well known.
Which DeVore?
She was Mrs. Frank DeVore.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there was 2 or 3 of them boys.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all dead now.
Yes.
My sister's dead, too.
Oh,
They're all
she is.
gone.
Mm-hmm.
And just got one daughter lives at Supply. I've
Mhm.
just got one niece.
Well.
That's all the relatives I got is just one niece.
Mm-hmm.
Of all on my side of the family.
Yes.
But on my husband's side of the family, I've got quite a side. There's a lot of it.
Yes.
If you ain't a prophet, you're related to a prophet. It don't make any difference. But anyway,
But your father then traveled and
no,
wrote
you
articles.
see, my father, the time I married,
Mm-hmm.
my father was getting up in years,
Oh,
and they moved in with us.
I
We
see.
thought they could stay with us till they located someplace, but we all got along nice, and they stayed, and my mother died of cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and 4 years. She was only with us about 8 years, and 4 of them was devoted to breast cancer.
It seems to me like I can remember reading articles written by a prophet. Would that be your father?
No, my father's name was Edgar.
Edgar.
Yeah.
Oh, the prophet, Edgar.
Well, there is it's like I say, if you're not a prophet, you're related to one. So it don't make any difference. There's lots of prophets.
Uh-huh.
Now,
Well-
there's a prophet that taught at Lawton for a long time and he was my husband's nephew. And there's prophets that moved around
It
quite a
sounds
bit.
like your husband was quite a successful farmer.
Well, he was all right.
Mm-hmm.
But my husband died. My husband was 95 years old and a little better when he died.
How long ago was that then?
Been 3 years.
3
a little
years.
better.
Uh-huh.
Him and I spent 4 years and 3 months in the rest home.
Was he ever in World War One or
No,
or
he was
two?
registered, but he never went. But we had 4 sons. I had 4 sons in the army.
Oh,
I had one son that served 4 years with the field artillery
and which war?
in World War II.
Uh-huh.
And I had another son
Is
that
he
was,
still living?
he's one that lives in Wichita, Eldon.
Mm-hmm.
And my youngest son served 4 years in the Navy. He
Mm-hmm.
lives here in Buffalo. And
Was that in World War II?
well, in fact, Len was in 51, because he was in. And then I had one son that was in the infantry 2 years, and one son that was in the Navy 2 years. I had 4 years, 4 sons in this service.
And they were all in World War II.
Yes, my oldest, my son Eldon was in when the Battle of the Bulge was fought.
Oh, was he in that? We're
Well-
trying to find people that was in that battle.
He
to
was
interview
not
them.
in the Battle of the Bulge, but he would have been. The army he was with
Uh-huh.
would have been there, but they had been routed a little different, and they weren't in the battle. But he was with the World War One, with the First Army.
Two World
But
War
his part that he was in had been routed.
differently.
You see, maybe I shouldn't tell this, but when my son went to the army, he was pretty ignorant about what he had to do and what he had. Well, of course, they didn't allow him to write anything out after
Oh,
that.
no.
He went overseas, and he was here for 2 years, and then he went overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, him and I together made a plan. And when he told me where he was, he told me how they'd working the roads north city. And how many
cute.
men was with. Well, he told me that. And we settled everything like that.
Yes. You had
When-
this plan made out before he left.
No, we made it out. I don't know how we managed to make it out. We made it out right. And maybe he come home. I don't know. He never got a furlough after he left overseas.
Yes.
But we had it planned.
Uh-huh. So
And-
you knew where he was
Yeah,
at?
so
and-
when the First Army was putting there and elevated at the Bulge, you know,
Yes, I know.
but they began to tell her, I know lady, Frances was down to laundry washing, and the lady come in and told her that the First Army was, I happened up there the same day, and Frances was about wild. She said, Mama, they tore the First Army all to pieces in Eldon.
He's in
And
that
I
army.
said, Francis Eldon's not with the First Army, he's with the Ninth Army. She said, how do you know that? I know. And he wasn't
Uh-huh.
with it.
Yeah.
A lot of people wondered how I kept such good track on him, but that's the way we did it.
Well, that was cute, and I'm glad you did. It saved you a lot of worry, didn't it?
But,
But we're trying to find the boys that was in this Battle of the Bulge, you know. There's not too many of them left.
well, you know, Eldon wouldn't really know anything about it. I don't think. That is, but it's like I say, the First Army was there.
Mm-hmm.
They were there all right, but he was with them big guns.
Mm-hmm.
He,
He probably would have a good story to tell us, though, of his army life.
he was with the field artillery,
Uh-huh.
and
Now,
he shot
is,
them big heavy guns.
is he the one in Wichita?
That's the one in Wichita. And,
Does he ever come home to see
once in a
you?
while. When he does, he's getting so old he won't pay no attention to nothing.
I wonder.
Well, now, Garfield County down here was in the infantry. He might have been somewhere around there.
Uh-huh.
He's, well, my oldest son wasn't in the army. All the rest of my boys was. But
Eldon Prophet. And who did you say?
Delbert, probably.
Delbert.
and Albert's here in town.
He is.
He was in the infantry, and Eldon was on the heavy artillery.
I'm not sure that Albert was with he wasn't with the same bunch as,
So it's awful close together all the time because
Yeah.
they barely missed seeing each other.
well, Delbert was a foot soldier,
You know, he was in the infantry.
while Eldon was with them big guns, and that made a difference. They seen one another,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember them kind of talking about Delbert driving by where they were one time, and them waving at one another and hollering at one another. But Delbert really had it harder than Eldon did. Eldon had it hard enough.
Oh, yeah, he all did.
They just,
During the dirt storm days, did you raise any crops?
huh?
Did you raise any crops during the dirt storm days?
Well, I suppose we had weeds. My husband got to be quite a big sheep farmer,
Uh-huh.
and he farmed, but,
What about the dust storms? Were you bothered with dust storms?
oh yes, we had dust storms. It looked like, at that time, my father was pretty sick over at Spry. He was over at my sister's, and I'd go down and sit up with him about every other night.
Mm-hmm.
When I'd leave the next morning, it was just like walking through ashes. It was more like ashes than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It was dusty, and lots of times we had to keep our coal lights burning in the house.
Mhm.
And I know I heard my husband say terrible times, 'cause he raised cattle,
Mhm.
being out on his horse and couldn't hardly see his horse.
Mhm.
And dust storms are bad.
Mhm.
But,
Can you remember the Black Sunday?
I don't know if I
I do.
remember especially.
Okay, you tell us about the Black
We
Sunday.
were out at Harper's out southwest of Buffalo here,
Mhm.
and I think the whole family practically was at home on the Sunday.
Mhm.
And the clouds started rolling in, and at that time I had a girl, probably 2 years old, and maybe not that old. It was, and a baby was still in a basket.
Mhm.
We all grabbed things to go to the cave,
Mhm.
and I know what time I got around to get the baby and get her out of the basket to go to the cave, but I couldn't even see where I was going. I just had to feel.
Mhm.
Then we all got out and went to the cave, but it was just rolled in there like a black cloud of dust.
Mhm.
No,
And you had the baby in your arms and you couldn't see her.
well, no, you couldn't see anything. It was just that black. And there
Mhm.
was a old calm turkey that was out there, and he went up. He always roosted on the windmill. He went up and went on the windmill. Went to roost. It was that dark. I always think of that.
Where's you living at?
Out there at Harper's
Harper's
that
Way?
day. Mm-hmm. All that cloud rolled in across the top. I think it, well, they didn't raise crops out there, and their land had been farmed to where it was blew. It would blow from one way one day, and next day it would blow from another.
Mhm.
And there's nothing uncommon to go in after one of these storms was over and sweep out a room and get a gallon of dirt out of it. We couldn't keep it out. It was just simply, we taped the windows shut, we put everything around them we could.
But yet
But it
it.
just penetrated, it seemed like. I don't know where it came from.
Mhm. And
Good.
were you on the farm at that time?
Yes, I lived with my husband and his folks out there on the farm,
Mhm.
southwest, Wesley, Harper on
Did
the
they?
town.
How did they manage to keep their fields from blowing, or did they?
They didn't, they just blew.
Mhm.
But I'd say that
Mhm.
they'd farmed all that land around there. There was,
Mhm.
out where Mom and them lived, there was quite a bit of pasture land. They
Yeah.
hadn't farmed like mine. So
Mhm.
it was kind of different down there, but, well, I just out there southwest, the Buffalo Africans owned that ground, and they'd farmed that.
How far out?
Well,
3,
just-
4 miles.
Oh, no, just as you leave
Oh. Mhm.
the African place, it's just out here on the outskirts of town.
Mhm.
And then
As you go west,
it's the south out
or
there.
go south.
Yeah,
Mhm.
highways divide the land.
Mhm.
But that was all plowed up, and then
Mhm.
Harper's had plowed their land all up. And there, as I said, I think there was just a small pasture. There was no pasture
Yes.
land running on me.
You got the dirt.
Yes. I never will forget it.
Another thing I kind of didn't, we lived on our farm from 1910, when we was married, to 1920.
Mhm.
And then my husband bought up 80 acres of land right over south of where the kiddie school was.
Mhm.
And we moved over there. He
Mhm.
built a house over there. And we moved over there in 1920, and we lived there till 1939. That's how come my kids all went through that school.
Mhm.
They didn't all go through, for I had some about graduate here at Buffalo.
Mhm.
And then we moved the house back on our farm.
Mhm.
And we lived there till 1959. And in 1959, we picked the house up and moved it to Buffalo.
Mhm.
And today I'm living in the house that my husband built at Kibby in 1920.
Well, what happened that Kibby disappeared off the face of the earth?
Well, you know, the school buses got to running, and we got
Mhm.
better schools,
Mhm.
and kids just began to grow up, I guess.
Mhm.
And when we moved our family back on the farm, a school bus come by and took them to Buffalo.
Oh.
So we took our kids out of the school, and gradually, I think it run 1 year after that, but the kids' school just went down.
Was it consolidated with the Buffalo
No.
School?
And it finally the building was finally tore down. They built a nice auditorium back of it. We had a nice auditorium where we played basketball. And it was all torn down, and right now, the acre of land that the Kibby School stayed on is down there by itself, and it belongs to a family named Stewart. That is, they were heirs. They got it through an estate. And I told you about the first store that's there, but they finally, the Cubbers built a big store there, a real nice store. And it was, there's a man out north of, no, they sold it to another man. And this man sold it to a man out north of Buffalo.
Well,
And they come in and took possession of it, and they moved it across the road. They turned it around. It was built on the west side of the road, but they moved it across on the east side. And it stayed there till Kibby divided, and then they tore the store down, and there's nothing at Kibby anymore.
well.
Except I do think cedar trees there. You know.
Well, did this railroad coming through Buffalo, you think, maybe help?
Well,
Kibby
yes, and then kids got tired of going there. Kids growed up and graduated and moved out. And
Well, I think the community just got to where it didn't have too many children in it, was one thing.
Huh?
There wasn't too many left down there.
That is it. There wasn't
families.
too many. Now then you go back down to Kibby.
There's nobody
I can
left.
go down there, all the original families. There's just one woman down there that belonged to one of the original families
Well,
that I know of. And there's one man, a man named Munson, woman's name's Owens. And there is a few younger people down there, but not very many. But Kibby is, and we sold our 80s back to, we sold it to a man named Lion. The Lion still owned, his heirs still own his land. But
if you were going to direct me so I could go down here, how would you
to go to Kibby,
to go to Kibby from Buffalo?
I'll tell you, go right out south of Kibby.
South
And
of,
if you want to go down on the highway, you go down on the highway till you comes to a road that turns off around, that goes towards Kibby.
well, how many miles south?
Well, you go about 2 miles,
2 miles.
and then you turn about a mile south, and then you go 2 miles into Kibby.
It'd be 2 miles south of Buffalo and then east.
It's 12 miles to Kibby.
Just the road and just follow your nose, you might say, around there, but there's nothing at Kibby anymore.
Well, I was just wondering, you know. I like to go back to those old places and walk around and.
Go back down there.
And another way you go right out here south of Buffalo, and go right up past the cemetery and go on till you go 6 miles west of Buffalo.
6
East
miles
of it.
east of Buffalo.
And then turn 6 miles south. I'm not sure about 6. That's right.
No, I think we just lived 12 miles out of Buffalo.
You smell 12 miles.
Do they have a sign or anything there showing
Well,
where?
I'd take this road, because that one is a dirt road and it's awful. But
It's that dirt road.
if you just go out south of town here, at one time it said to Kibby, but I'm not sure that sign's in there anymore. They changed that road. But you would go
That would be about
east to where
2 miles.
the house there, I think Doyle Farmer lives in it.
And then you go a mile south.
And then you go south, and then you go back past the vacant house there.
Go east then, go a mile south and then how?
Back and
Then back
no
east.
other way to go. You just
Uh-huh.
go
And
on
then it's
straight
about-
across the little old low deck bridge down there and up past the cemetery. And there's a white house a two-story house on the north side of the road.
Is that cemetery still being cared for?
Oh, yes, they keep building
Uh-huh. You folks have anybody buried there?
No.
No.
Well, we do in a way too.
Well,
Something's
yeah,
buried
of
there.
course.
That is true.
No, one brother, Dean, was in the Navy. He was off the coast of Iwo Jima when they had that terrible ruckus there, you know.
Oh, he was. Can you tell me something about that?
Well, I remember what he told me, if I got this straight. He and another boy went in to pick up casualties or somebody, and they just took a small boat and went in. Well, they couldn't, everything was in such an uproar, they couldn't find the headmaster, anybody to tell them who they're supposed to pick up. So he said they looked out and seen their boat starting to leave without them. He laughed and said we just crawled back in that boat and got back out to our launch and laughed. He said there wasn't nothing we could do there. They can't do anything without a command.
Well,
Yes.
He had that experience.
you know,
And this was where?
In Iwo Jima, where they planted that flag.
Yes.
Dean was just off, his ship was just off to one side when the Yanks raised the flag on Iwo Jima.
Oh, is that right?
He said he could have seen it, he probably did see it, but he was on his ship.
Well, does he live anywhere close where we could interview him?
No, he lives in Pueblo, Colorado.
Oh. And his name is what?
Name is Dean
Dean.
Prophet.
Dean. And he lives in Pueblo.
He lives in Pueblo.
Okay. Did you do any knitting or anything?
I didn't.
Did you do any knitting or anything for the war effort? What did you do?
Knit socks.
Mm-hmm.
And like that. We had regular meetings. That was in World War I, though, we had that.
Oh, you did,
In World War II, I don't think I ever done much but write for boys. I did write a lot.
In World War I now, who would pick up these socks and things you'd knit, and how would they get them to the boys? Do you know?
You know, I do not know. There's a woman named Wagner that kind of was head of it, that picked it up. And now at the present time, there is no Wagners around Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
There's the widow of one of the Wagner boys, Elizabeth, but I don't think she knew it. She was a school teacher when she married him. But,
Do you remember Armistice Day?
oh yeah.
And did you have a big celebration here in Buffalo?
Oh, Armistice Day was, yes, I remember Armistice Day. Yeah, they had it everywhere. And it's a little bit hard for me to separate World War I and World War II.
Yes.
Because I really didn't have anybody in World War I. My husband was registered, but they never called it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we had a family. They didn't call family men until they had to. And I do remember that he had a brother that was called up. And they come up and took a physical, and then they put him on a truck and sent him to Roston.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the doctor went around and took their temperatures, all with the same thermometers. And
Probably didn't wipe
they
it off.
sent him over to Roston to take the train.
Mm-hmm.
When they got to Roston, the word had come that the war had ended.
Well, how great.
So they all got to go home, and they all had the flu. The doctor spread it with his thermometer. I guess they all took it.
Did you folks have the flu at that time?
Oh, yeah, we had the flu in 1920, just after we moved in our new house, Kibby. We really had it.
Did you have very many deaths in the neighborhood?
Yeah, there were quite a few deaths in the neighborhood. We had a doctor in Buffalo what night and day, but he did go.
Mm-hmm. What was his name?
Miller, Dr. E.M. Miller. Dr. E.M. Miller was the doctor, and Dr. Winston.
Mm-hmm.
They were both doctors here.
Did you have any special medicine to take for that flu? The doctor give you anything special?
Not that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I was busy taking care of my family. I didn't hardly have time to have the flu.
And you didn't have it?
I had it after they all got over it.
Uh-huh. And then when the World War II ended, did they have any celebration here in Buffalo over that?
Yeah, I think the town about went wild when World War II ended.
Can you tell me about it? What?
Well, she probably can tell you more about
Okay,
that than I can.
Francis, we'll let you tell us.
Don't remember.
You don't remember?
No, I remember that Dean was home here and they dropped that bomb on
Iwo Jima.
Hiroshima. And he said, I'd rather have went ahead and fought the war than had him done that.
Uh-huh.
I don't think the war lasted too much longer after that, did it?
No, it didn't.
And,
But that's what ended the war.
yeah,
And there would have been a lot of soldier boys. We'd lost a lot if it hadn't been for that bomb.
I just remember him being home and making that remark, but then he was back over there.
Mm-hmm.
But, no, I don't really remember too much. I was raising my family.
One thing I've got
in
any recollection about, you know, Mrs. Durham, Dillard Durham, well, she was a very nice lady, very sedate and everything, never done anything really out of the way. But they claimed that Garrett was in the service. But when the war ended, they claimed she got out and made more fuss on the street that night. They had a big die. But I remember about them laughing about Viola Durham. She really did help her up.
She was really happy.
She was really happy.
Uh-huh.
So Viola Durham and Gaylord live here in town now.
Uh-huh.
And,
Did they have fireworks or a dance or anything like that, or bonfire?
I said, I was raising my children at that time.
Did they have a parade or anything?
I don't either. I just remember talking about the people that got the word. They just got so happy about it, and then they drove up and down the streets, I guess, and hollered. But if that driver was one of the ones.
Well, she had something to really be happy about. Could I ask you a few questions? I'm going to ask Mrs. Frances Harper about her family. How many children did you have?
I had 5 children.
Mm-hmm.
2 died in infancy.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat Flower Simpson is my daughter. She works down at the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
She has 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And I have 6 great-grandchildren.
Oh.
And Jean Harper and Leslie, they run the state for me now.
Mm-hmm.
They both have 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what my family's for. My husband died in March 1975, cancer,
What year were you married?
in 1932.
Mm-hmm. And did you graduate from
Like we did this.
from Kibbe? Mm-hmm. Well, now that was an accredited school, wasn't it?
Yes, it was an accredited school, and it was a school that, well, we didn't have so many students, but what they couldn't give each one of us time. In fact, a lot of them that went there thought they went to a better school than they ever found anywhere.
Usually that's the case.
I know one boy came back for the reunion he was talking about, and he went from Kibbe, went up to Wichita, and went to work for Boeing, and he was an architect, and really did well. Because we were taught in mathematics and things like that. We knew it, and he just did real well. And he said down there, he said, I told my kids, he said, you never know what you missed if you didn't go to Kibbe school. He said, we were just like a big family together, and we had our basketball team. We didn't have football. We had basketball. And there wouldn't be over 5 or 6 in each class. 8 to 9.
Who founded the Kibbe town? I
Well,
suppose a man
I
named...
think it just grew. They named it after a man named Kibbe, but a lot there's argument there. They say he just came up of cancer and played for the dancers
Oh.
and things, and they named the town after him. But I really think that
who would you say started the kiddie school? Phillips? Or?
Who started, who was the town named for? Kidby, what?
Well, it's like she said. They claimed the man that they called it Kiddie. Now, I don't know. And some claims that where they first started it was back over the hill, up on the hill there. But I don't know about that. But I know Kibby, just as Kibby was when we come there.
Sure.
And I know Kibby never got to be a very big girl.
Well, what year do you think it got started? Possibly. What year did it get started? A little town.
Oh, I imagine if Kibby had been there. I know them Phillipses must have come there before 1900. And John Marion had a pretty well stocked little store. Of course, you didn't keep anything but the things you had to have.
Sure.
And I don't know. He was pretty well. When Dad come out here in 1902. And when we come in 1903, that was the first I knew anything of them. But Kitty never was anything but a wide spot in the road anyway. But, we had a church. We had, they held meetings then and finally built a parsonage. There's a parsonage built, a 2-room parsonage. After they abandoned that, Irene Page of Tucker bought the house and moved it to a farm, and she later moved it right up here to Buffalo, main part of it.
What denomination was it?
Methodist.
Methodist.
No, it was Protestant Methodist. And then the Protestant Methodists, they quit, and the regular Methodists come in. They were Methodist people.
Wonder what was the difference between the two churches?
I don't know. We belonged to the Protestant Methodists, and they was, I might tell you a nice little story there.
Okay, tell us.
They went to church one morning, and my dad he was a little man, but he was an inquisitive man. He was hard of hearing, too. And the preacher was packing up his stuff. And he asked him, he said, well, wasn't hardly anybody there. And he said, well, what's going on? He's leaving. And Dad said, well, you ain't leaving the church, are you? He said, I'm taking all there is of the church with me. So that was the life we had in the Methodist Protestant Church.
Well,
then the Methodists, the regular Methodists come in and organized the church, but my husband was a little on the stubborn side. He said, no, it would be the same congregation we had, and he wouldn't join it. So we never joined the Methodist Church till we later come back on the farm and both joined at Buffalo. Of course, my mother's people were Methodists, and they preached. While my father's people were Irish, my mother's people were Germans. And I've got records of my mother's preachers, Methodist preachers, way back in Germany, so I've got quite a record of my mother's family.
oh, is that right?
And
Had you ever gone back to Ireland or to Germany to visit your...
No. I have been in Harford County 82 years, and except for 1 or 2 trips out back, I think we went back to Iowa one time, and I've been over in Woods County a few times, and crossing to Kansas to Wichita, and I've been out to Pueblo, Colorado. I have never been out of Harford County.
Well,
Never
that's
been.
quite a record.
That's the reason I'm so dumb. All I know is just what they have.
Well, you got a lot of history around Buffalo.
Oh, yeah. I tell you lots of things, but lots of things ain't. I can tell you lots of things shouldn't be repeated.
Oh,
And
now those are the kind we like to hear.
I can tell you lots of good things, but that takes too much time.
Oh, no, we've got time.
You know, I was just thinking a while ago, my daughter, now I read. This may sound ridiculous, but it's true nevertheless. My daughter brings me books from the Alva Library. She brings me 4 every week. And sometimes I read them all, sometimes I don't. I draw a limit on some kind of books I don't read.
Yes.
And
What kind don't you read?
I don't read the ones that has 4-letter words in them. And I draw them in up there.
Yes.
But I do, that's what I tell them. I've traveled all over Scotland. I've traveled all over Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
I've traveled in Germany. And I've been to London a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, she brought me a book. I just started to read it. I didn't read much in it last week. I laid it aside because I'm going to keep it over.
Mm-hmm.
There's 500 pages in it. But it is a woman dated back to 1800 and something, early in 1800. And she's telling her life, just as she lived it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to read that book if I don't get too tired. It ain't too interesting in a way. That is, it's not exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But you learn a lot about things. Like
What's the name of the book?
Well, right now I couldn't tell you because I read the first 2 or 3 chapters and thought, well, I don't want to settle down to that. I'll read something else and I'll keep that and read it over. And I laid it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. But we get a whole lot of things in these books.
Oh, yes.
I don't know whether you'll read it or not, but
Yes,
I don't
like to
pay
read.
much attention to a television.
I just have my special programs on the television, and then it's turned off.
Mine got so special, I just told them to unhook it. I didn't watch it. It just sat there,
Uh-huh.
and I finally thought, well, I can take $12.50 and spend it lots better than that.
Mm-hmm.
I can get on the phone and call some of my kids off a long distance.
Sure.
But I do read.
Well, that's good.
And we read now. This may sound out of place at this time, but I read a book. A girl going to school had been sent off to one of these schools, and her father and mother had separated. Her mother was American, and her father was Scottish.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived on an island. The mother couldn't take it. But they had sprung it on her, and she was awful upset. The head lady at school had quite a time with her. And the head lady had had some kind of experience too in her girlhood, and she commenced, and she said, don't try to tell me, the child said. If I've got to bear it, I've got to bear it my own way.
Mm-hmm.
I can't bear it yours.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't think much of that, but that covers a lot of things.
Yes, it does.
You can't bear your troubles the way other people bear theirs. You've got to bear it your own way.
That's right.
That's right. So you see, I get a lot out of books.
Yes. Well, can you remember when this country was all Woodward County?
Oh, yes. I remember when it was divided. I remember when the town of Buffalo was laid out.
It was a county seat before there was ever a town here, so I hear. Is
No.
that right?
No, we didn't have no county seat. Woodward was county seat.
Well, after it was divided, and
After it was divided, Buffalo was elected. Buffalo and Laverne both wanted that, but Buffalo got it. We had a little town right out here at the corner of this town.
mm-hmm.
Just a little off one side.
What was the name of that
That
town?
town was Brule.
Yes.
And there's a family come in here by the name of Beth, and a family by the name of Clark.
Mm-hmm.
They were the leading people. Clark run a little eating house, and Beth run a store.
Mm-hmm.
And Clark had a daughter named Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she managed to go to school, and I guess went off, maybe got a little. But she clerked in Beth's store and run it.
Mm-hmm.
And she finally married a man named Downs. Her house is right out the edge of town here.
Mm-hmm.
She died a year or two ago. I thought she was older than me, but I think she was a little younger, according.
Mm-hmm.
But the best is all gone.
Mm-hmm.
And
I wonder how come that town didn't get the county seat.
it wasn't nothing but
Just
a wide place in the road.
I've read where Buffalo didn't even exist at that time.
Well, it didn't. That's what I say. They had down where our Methodist church is now, down over they put up a building there, A lot of people called it the gymnasium. I don't know what it was, just up and down, good size. And people met there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the 7th day of April,
Mm-hmm.
1907.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the town was laid out.
Oh, it was.
And that's when people either bought or decided what lots they was going to take.
Mm-hmm.
There was a man named Harper that come here, and I don't think he's in relation to
No.
Francis' side of the family.
Mm-hmm.
But he come here and was instrumental in laying out the town.
Yes.
And there was so much devoted to hotels and so much
Mhm.
to main streets. The streets was all laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see that was 1907. I was about 18 years old, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was quite a meeting, I know that. There were a lot of people there, and after that, the town began to materialize.
Yes.
Bess moved his store from in out Brule. He moved it into town.
Mm-hmm.
And then his family named a Temple coming here. They had the hardware store.
Mhm.
Temple was pretty well fixed. And they was McMahon's had a big part in it.
Mm-hmm.
They had a farm out at the edge of town. And I don't know. I remember all that. Of course, I can't go into a lot of it. I just heard from the side. That is all.
Yes.
We didn't have a telephone thing down there.
Well, this Harper man, was the county named for him?
I think it was. But it wasn't. Now, Francis' father-in-law, one time the sheriff here, quit Harper.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it wasn't no relation, I don't think, to that
No,
Harper. I think he just vanished. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Harpers around, but no relation to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing Francis ain't mentioned, but I'm going to. Her family and my family, we've got a 5-generation family.
Oh, all living? Well, how wonderful. Have you got your pictures made?
We just got one picture. We never have went and taken them.
And they would have-
Oh, you must.
And I don't think they can stand my looks.
Well, this one picture, if we just enlarge it, is a good enough
They
picture.
just can't get together. But that is, it comes in from 2 now. We've got, on one side, they're all girls.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the great-great-grandmother, and she's the great-grandmother, and
Mhm.
Pat is the grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dara's just lately, she's been married 6 or 7 years, just lately presented her.
Tammy's the one that has the girl.
Yeah, Tammy's the youngest one's got the girl.
Uh-huh.
Tammy is Pat's daughter, and
Mhm.
Lennox is Tammy's daughter.
And the other side is what? How many? Well, I thought you had 2 sides. Both of you 5 generations. Is that the Harpers?
No, it was, yes, the Harpers, just the one girl's all I
The
can
one
see.
girl. She
The
just
rest
had
of them's
one.
boys.
The boy.
Mm-hmm.
And the boys are grown up. The boys are, they're large.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I mean. Pat's children's name were large.
Mm-hmm.
She's married a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And they C.A. Law and Robbie Joe Law. C.A.'s got 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
And Robbie Joe has got 1 boy.
Yes.
They're all boys. And then each one of the girls has, Dara's boy's a baby boy, don't he?
Yeah. There's no girls, but just Lennox.
Just Lennox is the only girl, ain't it?
No, Tammy was born on Pat's birthday,
Yeah.
22nd of January.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost a little girl that was a year younger than Pat that was born on the 22nd of January.
Well,
Then when Pat had Tammy, she was born on the 22nd. When Lennox was born, she just missed being born on the 22nd by about an hour or 2. She was born on the 23rd.
Well.
I tell her she's too stubborn.
Can you remember your first automobile ride?
I can remember the first automobile we ever owned,
Okay, what is
but to make quite a long story.
well, tell me about it.
Well, we talked about buying an automobile in 1915.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, people had autos, but not too many.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was, I will say, he was a mighty fine man. so I'm not criticizing.
Mhm.
But he had a way of doing what he wanted to do.
Mhm.
So we went over to Supply, and he come home, and he told me he had bought a second-hand car. I said, well, all right. But they were to bring it out for me to see it, and then he was to take them back to town,
Mhm.
and then he would drive it back. And in fact, his brother was going to come and go with him. So they drove it out, and I went out to look at it. Well, you probably don't know anything about the old Fords, but you know we didn't raise the hood up this way.
Mhm.
Well, they went over this way,
Mhm.
and this rod went around through here. Well, that rod had white streaks on it. That is, like they'd tore off a sheet,
Mhm.
cloth sheet down to pull the wires up off of the
Oh.
fencing. And I took one look at it, and I said, Claude, we do not want this car. Of course, the boys they were pretty well. In fact, they were kind of my sister's brother-in-law.
Mhm.
But they were real nice. They just, well, now what? I said, anything you have to have the wires. I said, no, we don't want it. And Claude said, well, then what do you want? I said, well, if we're going to get a car, let's get a new one.
Mhm.
It only cost about $500 to get a new Ford them days.
Mhm.
And they said, well, if you want a new one, well, sure, we'd be tickled to death to sell you a new one. We'll give you terms on it. Well, Claude said, I think I can raise the money. He had a nice horse and wanted to sell. But he said, if nothing else will do, they said, well, you just take us back to town and we'll send you out with a new car tomorrow. So they got ready to go back and talking about going back, and you'll never get back to town in that car. I said, you can start, but you'll never get back to town in it. I was pretty mad, and I was pretty feisty, I guess. Of course, they laughed at me. They walked 4 miles into town.
Oh.
And he'd come back the next day in his car.
Uh-huh. As a Model T.
Model T. Yeah.
Did you learn to drive it?
Yes, it set out in the yard. My mother was there with me. She said if I had a car sitting out that way, I'd learn to drive it. Got the lesson. So I go out and get my book, and I studied it, and I studied it. Of course, you had to
Crank it. Mhm.
So I thought, well, if I can start it, I'm going to drive it. So I drove everything else anyway. So I got out, and I got it cranked, and I got it running. And we had a driveway this way. And I drove around. I drove around a time or two and seen I done pretty good, but directly something happened. I forgot how to turn it off. So I took several more turns, and I finally decided, well, if I quit giving it gas, it'll quit running. So I quit giving it gas and stopped.
It died. But after that, then you were, after that, you could drive it.
Well, I drove pretty well the first time I put it in the shed and went to the back end.
Oh! Did it
Oh, we
damage?
had exciting times back in them days.
Yes, that's true.
But you think so now. $500 for a good, and it was a good car.
Mhm.
5,000 wouldn't touch me.
Was it a two-seated car?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And did it have a top on it?
Well, it had one of them tops that you laid down and then you
Uh-huh.
picked it up and put it on. It wasn't a solid top.
No. It folded back.
You had to hold it back.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're talking about it, the buggy my folks drove from Iowa out here was a Surrey with a fringe on top.
Oh, it was.
One of them big,
Uh-huh.
and the fringe.
And then you folks kept that and went to church in it, and
Oh yeah, as long as we was home, we
Mhm.
did that. But when we got the car, we drove it to church.
Dad traded it for the Dodge.
And that blue Dodge, yeah.
Because I remember that Sterling and Eldon was with me, and we was speeding right along, and we was going by how much dust we was stirring up behind us.
About how fast were you going, do you think?
Fast, about 20 miles an hour.
But that was fast, wasn't it?
She was the #1 car driver, and you know, then after she was married and the cars got to be coming, she didn't get her no license, and she sat back and didn't drive.
I didn't drive till...
I think her husband was so tickled when she bought her driver's license before he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
He made me go get it. He put her in the hospital, and he said, you just got to go get it.
Yes. But you drove a long time before they even had driver's license.
She was the car driver. She's a good car driver.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my daughter, older than her, she was one of these kind, the faster she drove, the nervouser she got, and the nervouser she got, the faster she drove. That Princess was a good driver. She could drive anywhere and anything.
I think that old Dodge out, the fuel pump was thick on it. And Dad showed us how to fix it, so we'd get out and take that thing apart, or the hood up, and we'd clank on that thing and beat it around till we'd get it started again. And I know somebody said, well, you must be quite a mechanic. And I said, no, I'm not a mechanic. I just know how we got to do to get this thing to run.
She was a car driver, really. They just,
Had to change those old flat cars off. Something like that.
after they got big enough to drive, I quit driving. And I never got no license.
You never did.
I never did get license.
Did you learn to patch a tire?
Oh, yes, we did not take them off. Now, I really don't remember on the Dodge, on the Ford, well, we could take them off and patch them.
And put them back on?
Put them back on again.
Mm-hmm.
We had to learn to do that.
You having so many children, did you have a particular task that each one was supposed to do to keep the
You know, back in
some
the
to
day,
bring in the coal and the wood, and you had
did
did you
live
have
that kind of way. When you brought in the coal here in Harper County for a long time, you took a tub and tied string to it and went out on the ferry and picked up cow chips.
Did you pick up cow chips?
Well, sure we picked up cow chips, and we burned cow chips.
Uh-huh.
Till after about time. I have a little remembrance of that. We burned coal after we went to Kitty and got wood, and we couldn't get them. That's one reason. You couldn't get it. You couldn't get wood, no, you couldn't
Get coal either. Mm-hmm.
You get a little coal, but you never got too much.
Uh-huh.
But after we got so, we burned it. But I think Dad took a notion he'd be a commodore. He bought a sack of cow chips on him. Nothing like pastime.
You couldn't imagine it.
You remember? Oh, you were mad.
I remember going out and picking them up, so I made sure they were dry.
But after we moved to Kitty, we never burned cow chips.
What would tell me how you would manage? Would you make piles here and there, or and then go back and pick them up later, or what? How would you manage?
You take the tub and you only had a rope, and at that time there was a lot of cattle.
Uh-huh.
You just went around and picked up dried cow chips.
And put them in this tub.
Yeah.
And then did you have a wagon or
and
some?
you had a wagon and put them in, and then you hauled them home and stacked them.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminds me of another little story. When my husband moved from Missouri out here,
Mm-hmm.
there's another family come with them. There's quite a bunch of them. And they got someplace out on the prairie where there was no fuel,
Mm-hmm.
and they were setting up something they could burn.
Mm-hmm.
A man come along and said, well, my land, I've got lots of chips. Just bring your sack and come up and get some chips. Got a right sack of them. So they thought, well, that'd be all right. And they started my husband and his cousin. His cousin's name was Dee. And he's pretty high-spirited little. And they went along, and Dee said, well, Mother, do you reckon they ever got so many chips? There ain't no wood chips, cut chips here. Said, how come he's got such a sack of chips? Well, Dad said they're cow chips. He knows what they was. And he said, cow chips. He said, yes. And he threw the sack down and said, well, you can go on if you want to. I ain't going to no cow chips. was awful, but they didn't make fire.
Mm-hmm.
They made a pretty good fire.
What kind of wild animals did you have in those days?
I do not know. They were coyotes, and there was skunks, and there was, of course, there was rabbits. There's always rabbits.
Did your boys trap for the coyotes?
Yeah, my boys done quite a bit of trapping in later years. But once in a while they got, but I don't remember now, they was wildcats. You know, in the last several years, I've been to me, I've heard Bob McVicker's caught a wildcat.
So I think there is again now.
Yeah.
Around those countries.
And
Well, last week.
when we first come here,
Wow.
my mother thought she heard a wildcat howl, and they howled it.
Mm-hmm. They sound like a woman screaming, don't they?
Yeah, a whole lot. It was like a scream. That's what it was like. And
Well, what was the bird that we was always so afraid of? Was that an eagle?
huh?
What was the bird that we was always afraid of? Was that an eagle?
It might have been, but there never was too many eagles.
Well, it was tales about carrying children off. I
Yeah.
remember when.
Well, it was
when-
the eagle. It was an eagle that done that. And then, of course, the hawks was a lot of hawks.
Yeah, but the eagle was the big one. I
And,
know.
there was lots of rabbits.
We were
of course.
kind of warned when we went outside to watch for them. When
Oh,
I
is
was
that
real
right?
little.
Uh-huh.
People eat lots of rabbits.
But the eagle would carry off children did.
And you had quite a few of them here, huh?
Well-
Or that kind of bird, anyway.
We were afraid of them.
Were they buzzards?
No,
around
they,
here?
they were eagles.
They were eagles. Well,
They
you
were-
never see an eagle now, do you?
No.
Of course
And
not.
I don't know if there was too many there except once in a while, and we
Mhm.
were warned. To,
Mm-hmm.
There's two kind of eagles. There's one they call the bald eagle. You know
Mhm.
that? What reference did that have to state? The bald eagle is a respected bird,
Yes.
and it's the best thing for you not to catch a bald eagle.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
oh, yeah,
isn't that our national emblem?
Yeah, it's something about the
And
bald
we
eagle.
don't,
You know,
uh,
I've
we
kind
don't
of
dare
thought
kill
it
it.
just-
Did you have any snakes?
Oh yes, we had snakes.
What kind?
Well, there was rattlesnakes, and then there was what kind of snakes? There was copper. And that's one thing that I've noticed about my old age.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, lots of these youngsters say, "Oh, we'll do the same thing," but they don't. But the name will leave me, and I can't think.
Well,
Now, I know just exactly what kind of a snake I mean, but I can't
rattlesnake, and
tell
then we
you.
had just what they call the bull snake, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It might have been a bull
He
snake.
was, it was a big snake. He would get the hen out
Big
and
snake, but it was
eat your
harmless
eggs.
snake.
Find one once in a while and see where they gulp down a whole egg. They were bad.
I never
for that.
killed but one snake. I did kill one. I seen a snake. I always hunted my husband up to kill the snake.
Mm-hmm.
But one day I went out to gather my eggs,
Mm-hmm.
and I put my hand down under the setting hen, or I suppose she was setting. She didn't move, and I got my eggs out, and I thought, well, that hen sure did sit there and feel rough. And I looked, and it was a bull snake. All coiled up in that nest, and I'd reached in and took them eggs out. You know, that made me so mad. I gathered that nest up, and I took it out, and I got the hole, and I chopped my bull snake.
No wonder he didn't wrap around your arm.
It was just coiled
They're
there.
harmless.
And I thought, well, that hen had the roughest feeling to it. And I thought, well, I'll look and see. And I looked,
That was a cold old hen. Huh?
Oh, do you have prairie dog towns?
yeah, we had lots of prairie dogs.
That's where your rattlesnakes come from. isn't it?
Yeah. Of course, the rattlesnakes was dangerous when people
Oh,
cut
yes.
them.
You know, out where I lived, we never saw rattlesnakes.
Well,
But we saw a lot of other kinds of snakes.
Like
Big
the-
snakes, huge snakes.
well, you found.
Well, slap out.
Well, you found what stop it.
Like we knew the task.
Yeah.
The what?
That's how come you knew the task then.
Yes,
That's right.
yes, yes. We lived, we've sold part of our land, moved to Woodward, but That's where I was born and raised, was south and east of Slap-Out.
That's how you slap that.
Yes.
Let's see, now I read an obituary. I believe the one was named McClough. Is that right?
Yes. Leota Hodges?
Yeah, right out south of Slap-Out.
No, she was from Forgan.
Forgan, maybe it was.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she'd been raised, though, hadn't she? Slap-Out.
No, she was raised in Beaver.
Well,
Maybe you're thinking of Ashpaul.
I don't know. I read their obituaries
Uh-huh.
but I Slap-Out. Of course, I've got a faint idea where Slap-Out is.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Johnny Prophet, just out at the Calf Ranch,
Yes.
is my husband's nephew.
Mm-hmm. Well, Francis, what was your job at home before you married and left home? What was?
I was supposed to look after the babies in the family.
Uh-huh.
I remember turning butter with one of these butter churns, but I'd forget what I was doing and wander off somewhere else. Time somebody else had to finish it for
Was
me.
it one of those where you had to
Just
pump?
To pump up and down, pump
Uh-huh.
up and down to get
Uh-huh.
that butter.
How many cows would you usually milk?
Oh, we've milked as high as 23.
By hand?
Yes, we each one had to go. Now that's one thing we did. We
Now
had to
you-
get up in the morning and go milk.
Oh.
God, used to have a brother that said if you wasn't no use in calling us before 11 o'clock at night, we'd be out in the milk lots that long time. We did.
We milked cows, and we milked them out
Cows. And,
in the open. We didn't even have stalls. We had to just get them in a corral and go sit down on a stool and try to get them to stand still till you could.
Francis is always the one that could do the peculiar things.
Oh.
We had some cattle get in the kind of stuff that poisoned them. I can't remember what that was. But Dad sent this cow down to the house
They bring them all
Better.
in.
and told Francis to tell me to give it some sweet milk. To give it a glass of sweet milk. She said, I'll give it to her. She couldn't get the cow to drink out of the glass.
We was all so upset. They got into the grass and went to get hospital. Johnson grass. And there he was bringing a whole bunch of cattle in, and they were fetching. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess we was all upset. I never will forget. I run out there with that glass. I thought the old cow felt bad enough she'd drink it.
Well, did you manage to save the cow?
I don't remember. I think we
I
saved most of
suppose
the money.
so. I think
We lost several of that day, so
Mm-hmm.
always had a bad day.
How did you take care of your milk? Now,
Huh?
milking 23 cows, you had a lot of milk. How did you take care of it?
Oh, we sold the cream. We fed the milk to the calves and to the pigs. And,
Did you have a separator to separate?
well, we had a separator and so,
Mm-hmm.
well, we had, when we first married, we had 3 or 4 cows and we had more milk and we went to a sale and we sold a separator where we bought it.
Uh-huh.
And of course the rest of them all made fun of us for buying a separator. I don't know we'd be throwing it out, but God's brother the next fall, he come in and kind of said a thing about it, and I said, well, no, we haven't got rich, but we don't owe no grocery bill.
Yes.
But he owed a big grocery bill. I said, oh, you don't? I said, no, we don't owe no grocery bill. We paid for our groceries. So the next year he milked cows.
Mm-hmm.
And people down had milk cows. It wasn't only us, everybody did.
Yes.
But I say when we milked 23, I think in that case we just kind of milked them the neighbors' cows
Mm-hmm.
while they went on vacation to help them
Yes.
out with them. I think about 17 or 18 cows.
And then you took this cream to town, and they
Yeah.
bought it.
They took it, they had a creamery that bought it, and then here, and then we could ship it.
Oh,
We shipped cream from here to Beatrice, Nebraska.
is that right?
And they used it, they had their mills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's lots of cream, cattle and cream, and like that helps save this country.
Yes. Well, then you would have your cream here to put on the train, I suppose.
Huh?
You put your cans on the...
Yeah, we had our cans. They were solid cans, and we'd ship the can, and they'd ship it back.
Uh-huh.
And we actually took 2 cans.
Did you get more money that way, shipping it?
Yeah, we only made little money, more money, but shipping it that way, and for a
Then
long
you-
time they wasn't too good an outfit you buy, and then finally they got, so they put men here to buy cream. And
Then
Well,
your
we
cream
had a
and-
creamery here one time that made butter.
Oh, yes, you did. I forgot that.
But we had the creamery here one time in Cora Prophet.
oh yeah, we had a big creamery here, yes.
And they
They
bought,
made that good cream, and I suppose made butter out of it, I didn't
yeah,
know.
they made good butter though too.
And,
Let's see, there was a man from Laverne came over and bought that creamery and ran
Yeah.
it for a while. What was his name?
yeah, they just didn't do it on
I can't think of his name either.
Is it Armour?
No,
Mr. Marlin thought was on
Ball.
Mr. Ball.
Ball.
Huh?
Mhm. Ball was his name.
Ball.
That bought the creamery here.
That might have been it. We had,
Well, the cream and the eggs and bought your groceries and probably a little bit left over, and you'd spend it for what?
well, I suppose it's better for clothes.
Clothes and things
that.
like that.
Of course,
Well,
I sold continually.
You sold for other people.
No.
Oh,
sold
just
for
for
my
your
family.
family.
You got 12 kids, you don't do much for other people.
Well, that's
no,
right.
Huh?
no. When Coleman's had their store there, now, we bought cream and eggs in there because I remember that he could, well, he had merchandise of all kinds and groceries and
Mhm.
and we, if you didn't spend all your money, you got tokens
Oh,
that you had to take back in and spend.
and you'd have to spend it in this
In
store.
the store, Mr. Coleman give us each one a set of those tokens. I've got a set.
Well,
Well, I remember them tokens.
or can you think of anything else?
Oh, I could think of everything, but I don't want to stay here all week.
Okay, well, I sure thank you, Miss
Well, you
Prophet, and
got
I'm glad I
everything
met
you got.
you,
It's,
and you too, Francis. And so it's time to sign off.
Huh?
It's time to sign off.
Yeah, it's time to quit.
Okay. Okay, well, I sure thank you, girl.
Yes, thank you.